Welcome to Virtual Math Masters. I'm your boy, Master Cruz, so you never do math alone again. And today we're going to talk about midpoint formula. So let's dig or jump right into it. So here we go. Midpoint is a point in the middle. So if I have a point A, any point A, we're going to say that's an endpoint of my segment. And I have another endpoint B. The point right in between, exactly in the middle between A and B, is going to be called our midpoint. We're going to use the letter M to denote that point. Now, what do we mean by exactly in the middle? Well, what that means is that if this distance between A and M was 3 units, then the distance between M and B is also 3 units, right? If I were to change this distance, instead of 3 units, is 5 units, okay, then this is 5 units. So wherever point M is, point A in this case is 5 units to the left, and B is 5 units to the right of M. So it's the same distance. M is exactly in the middle. We are interested in finding these distances in different scenarios. So here we go. Example 1. Find the midpoint of AB given A is -2, 3 and B is 1, 5. This is actually helpful sometimes when you want to meet friends and you guys live far apart and you're like, let's find a restaurant that, it's right in the middle so that we drive kind of like the same amount. This is that idea. You want to find the middle ground. You want to find that middle point. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to use this formula out here. I don't know if you know this, but the way that you find the middle of something in math, it's adding them and dividing by 2. You add those two quantities and you divide it by 2. That gives you the average. So find the midpoint of A. I'm going to go ahead and, like always, I need 2 points. So I have 2 points. These are my endpoints, so I'm going to label them. I'm going to call this, a point is always x, y. Hopefully you know that by now. The other point is also x, y. And I have to choose one of these points to be my first point. So I'm going to call this my first point because that's point 1. I'm just going to add a 1 there. So x1, y1. And because this is my second point, I'm going to add a 2, x2, y2. And after I label them, which is my first step, then I substitute into the equation. So it's always the same steps. I'm going to write them for you. First, label the points, then substitute into the formula. These are the same steps that you will always do. Please do. I'll write them down. All right, so here we go. Now open a parentheses, and instead of writing x1, I'm going to write down what x1 equals. x1 equals -2. So -2. Now the actual formula has a plus sign, so I'm going to write down a plus. And then I'm going to write down x2. Well, x2 right here is 1. So I'm just going to put 1 all over 2. So it's all divided by 2. And I'm going to repeat the same process with y. I'm going to go to the other side and I'm going to do y1. So y1 in my problem is 3. The actual formula has a plus sign. So I'm going to rewrite that plus right here. And then what is y2? Well, y2 is 5. So I'm going to write 5 right here, and this is all divided by 2. Now, my final answer, which is the midpoint, and I forgot to put an M in the front. Please make sure you put the M in the front so that we know it's the midpoint. It's going to be this simplified. -2 plus 1, same sign, add, difference, and subtract. Get the sign of the higher number, then you'll be exact, y'all. That's going to be -1/2, right? Because -2 plus 1 is just -1. And then it's over 2. So I just put the negative in front. There's a comma, so comma. And then 3 plus 5 is 8. And 8 divided by 2 is 4. So I jumped a step, but this is the step that I skipped. It's 8 divided by 2 because that's what 3 plus 5 is. 3 plus 5 is 8. Then we divide by 2, and that gives us 4. As you can see, the midpoint has an x coordinate and a y coordinate, as it should, because this is on a graph, and that will be the answer. The midpoint, it's always a point. That's why it's called a midpoint, and you will always have an x value and a y value. That's why the formula starting at the beginning has a comma in between. So let's put the M here to make sure that we're looking at the same thing. And that's it. If I were to graph this, The point -1/2 comma 4 will be exactly in the middle between these two. Let's do example 2. Example 2, it's a little bit different because for example 2, they gave us the midpoint. In this case, the midpoint is -1 comma 1/2, and they gave us one of the endpoints, -3 comma 4. They want us to find B, which is the other endpoint, right? So if I go to this illustration, endpoint, midpoint, endpoint, they gave us these two. They want us to find the last endpoint. How do we do that? Well, we can still use the same formula. Okay, we can still use the same formula. We're just going to use it a little bit different this time. Okay, so here we go. Let's plug it in. So for example, now we could label, actually, before we plug it in, let's label. This is x1, y1, okay? But I am looking for x2, y2. I do not know what B is, right? I don't know what x2, y2 is. So because I don't know what it is, when I go to the formula, that's exactly what I'm going to write down. I'm going to write down x2, y2, and I'm going to solve for it, okay? So this is my midpoint. This is my answer. So here we go. Let's do it. So it looks like my answer here will be x1. So remember the formula. I'm going to write it right now real quick. x1 plus x2 all divided by 2. And y1 plus y2 all divided by 2, right? That's my formula. So I'm going to rewrite this formula. And I know what x1 is. x1 is -3. So I'm plugging in this -3 for x1, but I don't know what x2 is. So I'm just going to say plus, and I'm going to write down x sub 2 because I don't know what it is. And this is all divided by, right? This is all divided by 2. There's a comma here. I'm going to repeat the same step with y. Now, y1 is 4. I know what it is. So I'm going to write down 4. I'm going to write down the plus. I do not know what y2 is. So I'm just going to write down y2 all divided by 2. Okay. And I know what this equals. This equals my midpoint, right? And the midpoint is -1 comma 1/2. So now I have the numbers that correspond with each side of the point. I know that this it's going to equal -1 because remember, this is the x value of my midpoint and this is the y value of my midpoint. So I'm going to check out what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to take both of the x values, okay, both of the x values, and I'm going to set them equal to each other because that says equal, right? So I'm going to write down for the x, okay, for x, I'm going to write down -3 plus x squared, x2, sorry, not x squared, x2 all divided by 2 equals -1. And this is all from everything that I just circled, okay, with x's. Now this right here, it's an equation that it's easy to solve. All I have to do is multiply both sides by 2. Okay, so I'm going to multiply both sides by 2 because that's the denominator, and that will cancel the denominator. And I'm going to be left with -3 plus x squared, okay, x squared equals -1 times 2 is just -2. And then x is not by itself because it's being subtracted by 3. So the inverse operation here will be to add 3, right, to both sides. And when I add 3, this cancels. And I get that x sub 2 equals -2 plus 3, 1. I just found out the x value of point B, which is x2. x2 right here is 1. That's going to be 1. So I'm going to repeat the same process to find out the y value for y2 for point B. So I'm going to repeat the same process. I'm going to look at the y side of the point and at the y answer. So I'm going to say now this is going to be for y. So to find y, I'm going to write down 4 plus y sub 2 all divided by 2, which equals 1/2. So I got this from the y coordinates of my points. I set them equal to each other, and then I solve for it. So again, this is a fraction. I'm always going to multiply by 2 because that's the denominator. So I could cancel it. And then I get that 4 plus y2 equals 1/2 times 2. If you're not sure how to multiply this, all you got to do is put the 2 over 1, and then you multiply TBT. If I say TBT, you say BBB. That means top by top, bottom by bottom. That's how we multiply fractions. So I'm going to do it up here real quick. 1 times 2 in the top will be 2 over 2 times 1 at the bottom will be 2. And 2 divided by 2 is just 1. So this is 1, all right? I hope that you understand that. I'm multiplying 1 times 2, which gives me the top is 2. 2 times 1 at the bottom gives me 2 at the bottom, and 2 divided by 2 is just 1. So that's the 1 over here. And to get y squared by itself, all you got to do is subtract 4 from both sides, inverse operations. This cancels, and you get that y sub 2 equals -3. So because y sub 2 equals -3, I found my x value and my y value, which means now I can come back here and write down the point B, which is what they want. Well, I'm going to write it down here so I have enough space. The point B, which is what they want, is 1, -3, because it's x2 and y2. And that is how you find the endpoint if you're given an endpoint and a midpoint. If you need additional help, please don't forget to visit Virtual Math Masters for a free tutoring session, and I can help you in a personalized setting. And if you need additional help, join our community, join our masters, and you have the best grade that you've ever had in math your whole life. You'll never do math alone again. That is a fact. I'm your boy, Master Cruz. I'll see you next time.